Let's go.
Let's get started in this room for those of you who are staying. We are asking on this stage the question, what does the cloud actually change? Our speaker brings a ton of experience to the topic. He is the CTO of Improving, a company that is a long-standing Microsoft Gold partner and specializes in helping businesses in a wide range of industries to solve their technology challenges. He has over 15 years of experience in delivering custom software and integration solutions and is now focused on cloud-based computing. So please welcome to the stage, Rich McCraw.
This podium. Yeah, there we go. This will be better. Are my slides on this, or? Whoop. We can go without if we have to. So, hi, I'm Rich McCraw, as I said, CTO of Improving. We're a Atlanta-based consulting company. You might have known us as Innovative Architects till about a year ago, till we joined with Dallas-based Improving. We're across 7 cities, and a lot of our focus is on the cloud and how to help companies better use the cloud. The idea today was to talk through what the cloud actually means to your businesses, rather than kind of what it is from a marketing standpoint or a buzzword standpoint. Because people say the cloud for a lot of things, but that's not actually what the cloud normally really means and how it changes your business. So first I want to talk through just a real baseline of what is the cloud. After that, we'll talk about why you should be using the cloud. And that's going to be a lot around cost and efficiency. It's not all flashy, it's not all brand new tech, but it's ways you can run a leaner, more efficient IT organization to support your business. Then we're going to talk about why it's important that you move to the cloud now. Why is it time for you to begin to move your business and embrace the cloud? Why not wait another 3 years? Why is this a technology that's really at the time you need to be adopting it? And finally, we'll talk about what that means actionably for your business. So first, for what is the cloud, I originally had a really funny video that we were going to play, but we're not going to. But it was, if you remember about 10 years ago, Microsoft ran a bunch of TV commercials about people going to the cloud. You'd have a family stuck in an airport and they'd go to the cloud to watch a movie off their home computer. Or they'd go to the cloud because their kids had their eyes closed in a picture, and they'd use their computer to merge two together. The cloud was saving them. Some might be a little harsh and say that's just a lie. That wasn't the cloud at all. That was just Windows. That's just Microsoft using its software. Answer is, though, it really probably wasn't just a lie. It's just a great oversimplification and kind of using the cloud as a marketing term without any real power behind it. And what underlies that is the cloud really isn't the same thing as connectivity. What Microsoft showed in all those commercials 10 years ago was things that could connect to each other. Right? We all have phones that can connect to other people's phones and your computer. That's not new. We've had connectivity for decades at this point. The internet is not some brand new thing that's come up over the last 10 years and changed business. The internet was there before. The cloud isn't connectivity. The cloud is instead a different way we're using that connectivity. When people talk about the cloud, it's not some magical new technology that never existed. It's instead the core fundamentals of IT: hosting, servers, maintenance, upgrade, security, but all moved out of your control and provided as a service. So the idea is if you could take everything you have to do to run IT in your own organization, and you didn't have to do that part of it, but you could just use the systems, that's really what the cloud becomes. Now, that's not to undersell connectivity. Connectivity is really important. Without connectivity, the cloud can't work. That's why this didn't come around in the 70s or the 80s or the 90s. But when someone tells you there's a story about connectivity, that's not the cloud that's creating that disruption. That disruption was already there. So what does the cloud actually mean, and what parts of the business is it changing? Well, that's when we want to look at, there's two different kinds of disruption we normally see coming out of technology. One type of disruption is new markets, right? New business opportunities, new customers, new lines of business, right? Those are wonderful. Those are game changers, right? That's Airbnb, that's Bitcoin, that's things that literally didn't exist but have been created. And sure, there are plenty of those on the cloud. But most of those stories are about connectivity, they're about other technological advances, and they're about the cloud making it easier for people to get that in front of the market. Where most of the cloud-driven change comes is really efficiency, cost, and scale. Because there's a completely different kind of disruptor where I may run the same business I ran yesterday, but I run it a lot cheaper, leaner, and more agile. Because if I do that, I can do it better than my competitors. Or if I don't, my competitors can undercut me. So that's really the disruption we want to talk about when we talk about what's the cloud going to offer you. And what this really comes down to is just the cost of implementing the most unsexy thing you probably do in your business, IT systems. No one likes to implement IT systems, but we do have to use them, right? And we use them because they make our business better. Well, the general research right now shows that if I'm implementing a new enterprise, 55% as much to start from scratch to build that in the cloud as it does to build it on-premise. And the reason for that change is if you think about what an on-premise environment looked like, you had to buy servers. You had to order them. They had to come in. You had a place to house them. You have to power them. You need staff. You have to support them. You have to upgrade them. That all goes away with the cloud because someone else is doing all that work for you. So what it changes is that cost structure from being a rather large upfront investment to % less overhead, or with 55% of the overhead, you're probably going to come out better for it. But it's not just the implementation of those systems. It's also everything else that comes after. It's maintaining them. It's rolling them out, expanding them to a new office. Because in traditional IT infrastructure, you're doing these costs over and over and over again. The general rule is if I do a new implementation of a system at one office, moving to a new region is going to cost about 1/3 of that full implementation again, over and over and over again. Again, with the cloud, we cut that cost down to as little as 35%. And that really, really can help you expand with a lot less overhead, right? Finally, once you're up and running, what are the additional costs just to keep the lights on, right? In traditional IT, hardware upgrades are something that have to happen every 3 to 5 years. If you're running hardware that's more than about 5 years old, you're probably out of support, it's probably legacy. At best, you're on a counting clock till you've got to replace everything. And the longer you wait, the more that costs. But if I'm doing it every 3 to 5 years, and the average is 6 to 12 months of business disruption to do it, right? I'm spending more and more time just keeping my lights on, just keeping my business running, and not really using the IT to help implement better processes, more efficient processes, right? Or do anything that adds value. So as the cloud can help change that cost curve, right, that's going to give you an advantage. Now, the flip side of this is companies will happily tout to you total cost of ownership on the cloud over 5 years is half of what an on-premise solution is. And they're not completely lying, but Microsoft and Oracle and Amazon are They're in on the game. They're not losing their licensing revenue. What you see instead is, instead of investing $500 for growth you hope that's going to come and takes cash out of your pocket today, instead, you can invest enough to get the system in place, perhaps a better system than you could have otherwise, and as you grow, the cloud lets you scale that much more easily. Because rather than buying servers for another region or another office, rather than buying additional hardware, getting it delivered, racked, mounted, and running, if I need to expand, sometimes in the cloud, that's as simple as I turn a dial on a web page, and I now have more resources. It can be as easy in something like Salesforce as clicking the up button a few times to say I want 100 users rather than 20 users. And you've made these changes in days rather than in months. And you're only paying for them now that you're ready to consume the resources, rather than having to build and hope your business is going to get there. Or, on the other flip of that, realizing your business is growing faster than you thought, and you simply don't have the resources in place to support it. So that's the cost story, right? The cloud's going to give you efficiencies. It's going to give you cost reductions. And, I mean, that's generally exciting to at least the financial side of it, but that's also something you may feel like you can delay, especially if you already have investments in on-premise technologies. In fact, especially if you have investments in on-premise technologies. Because one of the dirty secrets about the cloud is if you take something that's on-premise, where you've already made a lot of these upfront investments, and you decide to move it to the cloud, you're probably looking at 7 years before you get an ROI on that move. Again, the cloud's not free. Cloud is cheaper. But if you've already made investments, you are absolutely having to remake those investments, and there's usually a pretty long tail to turn down the investments you've already made. So it's not something that you can change to overnight. So why do you need to do it now? Why do you need to do it if you've already made the other investments? Well, if my first premise was correct, and it costs you 55% as much to run in the cloud as it costs to run on-premise, what does that mean for all the new entrants in the market which start in the cloud? They have lower cost. Lower cost generally means they can do things you can't do. So even if you're on the on-premise system, if you made those investments, you've got to look at changing, even though it's not particularly attractive, because it's the only way you can stay competitive. Then why do you have to do it now? Why, if I'm starting now, even if I believe the cost story, why do I really have to move to the cloud today? Well, the third tenet we wanted to talk about was security. And security really is something that everyone should be worried about today. Statistics show there were 112 billion cyber breaches in 2018. That's supposed to more than double in the next 3 years. Those numbers seem big and they don't seem that scary, but if you think about the average cost to a US business that has a cybersecurity incident, it's $7.6 million. That's the cost. And you may think, well, that's just big businesses. That doesn't matter to small businesses. Well, for a medium-sized business of 100 to 200 employees, the average cost is $1 million. And for a small business of under 75 employees, $690,000 is the average cost to recover from a cybersecurity incident. I don't know how many small businesses in this room have $690,000 of cash laying around that they can still continue operations if they've got to pay that out. Right? We need to worry about security because it will affect your cash flow. One of the biggest fallacies in information security is that businesses don't go out of business because of a cybersecurity incident. You'll even see that in lots of papers from security experts. And it's true. If you're a really large business, Equifax is not going to go out of business because of their data breach. Marriott, is not going to go out of business for their data breach. That's not true for small businesses. For small businesses, 60% of small businesses who get hit with a cybersecurity incident are out of business within 6 months. So if you're a startup and you have an incident 6 months later, chances are you're gone. 1 in 8 businesses existing, not even started, 1 in 8 existing businesses at the beginning of 2019 are expected to be bankrupt by 2020 because of a cybersecurity incident. And it's all about cash flow. Because if you get hit, that's cash flow just to keep operating. And people think of cybersecurity incidents as a data breach. Well, I'm not storing everyone's credit card. I'm not a retail store. I'm not Target. Nobody's going to swipe credit cards. Those aren't the only things you have to worry about. Those are absolutely out there and absolutely important. And breaches of just personal information are becoming more and more costly. But you also have things like ransomware. If you've read the news, there's entire cities that have shut down for weeks because of ransomware attacks. There's disgruntled employees and the ability for them to destroy your IP. What happens if you lose your last 3 years of work product? Can you lose all of those BIM models you spent thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars building for your clients? Right? These are real things that happen to real businesses. And they're growing at a rate of 85% a year for small business. So from there, if we say, okay, it's not fun, it's not sexy, but we need to deal with IT security, even if we're a small business. Even if the only thing that you have to secure is your phone that you probably have in your pocket that has your company email on it, that if someone somehow breaches it, they can send different wiring instructions to a customer, and that $600,000 payment doesn't go to you. We've seen that happen to multiple customers just in the last 2 years, right? These are real things that cause cash flow issues. So even if you believe all that, you may talk to your IT staff, and the answer is, well, we can do it better, right? Hey, we have slides now. Look at that. Woohoo. Thank you. So we can do it better ourselves. The answer is yes, absolutely. Every IT staff that's well-trained can probably do this in a wonderfully secure manner. And you should believe your IT staff when they tell you they're smarter than everyone else in the world, because that's what they're going to say. And sometimes it's even true. But to do this right, you have to do things like audit for misconfigurations, right? What that means, it doesn't really matter technically, are you proactively checking your systems to make sure that they're continue to be configured in a way to prevent security breaches? You have to patch known vulnerabilities. If any of you have an IT staff that does active patching and you have the wonderful problem of every month or every quarter they take things down to patch them, that's great. That's not enough. Patches are released monthly for everything, but there's patches that get released off-cycle weekly. And the problem with those patches is they're what are called 0 days. And if you ever hear an IT person use the word 0 day, that just means the door is already unlocked and open. That means that is a security issue that is so large, it's known, people in the wild are already using it to break into systems, and they probably don't even have to target you. They're simply scanning everybody's system to find anybody with the unlocked door, and they're going to walk in there, right? You may not even see the side effects for this for months. In our own company years ago, we had a problem with one employee's email getting breached, and it took us about 3 months before we caught it. Now, luckily, we caught it before they did anything with it, But sometimes, once one of these vulnerabilities happen, it's just a ticking time bomb. You don't even know when it's going to happen. And to do that, you need to proactively monitor performance, monitor the activity on your system, right? We were able to determine that because we monitor where and who's accessing our email systems. Turns out, we didn't believe we had a lot of employees traveling to Bulgaria on vacation, right? That led us to know something happened. But if we weren't proactively monitoring that, we wouldn't have known until the first wire transfer for a customer didn't come to us. Human error in just doing these simple tasks is estimated to be about 90% of what causes most companies to have a data breach. So when your IT staff says they can do it better, it's not about can they. Do they have the time and resources to do all of those things on the board? And can they do that in comparison with a Microsoft, who's spending $1 billion and has hired 3,500 security consultants just to look at their platform and keep it secure for you? So they're probably right. They could do it better, but they definitely don't have the tools to do it better. That leads us to kind of one of the oldest jokes in IT security. It's not that funny, but it is kind of real. And that is, in any IT staff asking for security budget, proactively saying, hey, we need to spend money to add these things to our systems that give you zero business value. You won't even know we did it. And if you do, you probably know because it annoyed you that you got an extra step to log into a system. They're beggars. No one ever gives them money because the business case is just hard till a data breach happens. If you are a small business and you just had to pay $700,000 to fix that data breach, that IT team's getting all the money in the world. This is something you have to invest in up front because it is a black swan event. When it happens, the impact to your business is huge. Got a little lost because I'm only half in my slides. But you may also say, well, that's okay. I have cyber insurance. That'll protect me. Well, that didn't protect Target. Just in 2017, for Target's data breaches, they took a $300,000 hit. Now, that's not lost business. That's not lost goodwill. That was $300 million spent purely in recovery efforts. That's equivalent to them losing half of their pharmacy businesses overnight. That's more than they paid in state and local taxes across all the localities where they operate, right? Can your business handle that kind of cash flow? So we talked about cost. We talked about security. What does this actually mean? What does this room actually need to do or care about? Or why does this matter? Well, the first thing is, this isn't all negative. One of the things that these cost savings are going to allow you to do is punch above your weight. If you think back 10 years ago, enterprise systems, ERP, planning, CRM, BIM, those were for large corporations only. But if we can lower that cost of entry, if you don't have to lay out hundreds of thousands of dollars for equipment to start this up, you can use the same systems large business uses, right? An SAP implementation 10 years ago was something you measured in the 8 figures. Now you can get in for 6 figures, right? That's a really big difference in point of entry to use these large-scale systems. It also can let you scale faster than companies that don't use it. If you're in the cloud and you need to scale from $10 million in customers to $100 million in customers, you can do it in a matter of weeks. If you're not using the cloud and you didn't invest ahead of time, that could take months and 10 times as much money. This lets us unleash the power of the small business, right? Small businesses, by definition, are lean. A small business usually has as much as one IT staff person. A medium-sized business has 1 for about every 100 employees. How much of that is just keeping the lights on, right? The rule should be about 50% of your IT budget should be growth, and 50% should be keeping things running. If you're running 1 for every 100 people, you're just keeping the lights running. How are you going to transform and help your business grow? Anything we can do to offset costs, to offset tasks, so you can use those people to grow your business is going to make your business better, right? It's also going to give you access to tools that let you better utilize those resources, both today and tomorrow, right? And the tomorrow there is because you no longer are forced to worry about upgrades, about, well, when do I need to take the word for you? So how will you grow, right? What if I'm successful? How do I go from local to regional to global? To move to an entire new region, a new state, a new country than it was in the old style IT. So if you're going to grow, doing more for less money, and if you don't, your competitors will. And so that's why this becomes something that's got to drive even non-IT, non-tech businesses. You've got to leverage these cost savings if you want to stay competitive. So I think I'm out of time.